Before we get into today's video, I would like to give a shout out to one of our newest subscribers, the Werewolf Ranger. What an interesting name. Anyway, thank you for subscribing and welcome to the family. And now without further ado, let us get on with today's video. Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Jury Hun, and welcome back to Dungeons & Dragons Character Concept, where we take a look at the different races within Dungeons & Dragons and see what combinations of classes and backgrounds best fit with the lore of these races, so that you can create a generic character when you feel you've run out of ideas for your character. This is by no means how you should play these characters. These are just generic ways of having a character built if you don't have any ideas left. I've actually got a whole entire series of these videos, and the playlist is going to be around here somewhere, I'm sure. So why don't you check out the rest of them to get an idea of what this video is about. Well, technically you already know what this video is going to be about, but we are doing Tritons today. And these aquatic humanoids hail from the plane of water. That's right, they're not even from the material plane, at least not to begin with. You see, in the plane of water, the Tritons faced off against elemental evils, like the Kraken or the Swagan. But one day, they noticed that their prisoners had disappeared through a portal to the material plane. So they decided to chase after them. And now we have a lot of these Tritons here in the material plane, down in the darkest depths of our oceans, guarding these portals to and from the plane of water, making sure that the material plane cannot be threatened by these evils from another world. Now, according to the Wikipedia, it does state that the examples they give for these quote-unquote elemental evils are Krakens and Swagan. But it also says, and many more. So, I'm sure you can imagine what evils they also fight against. So, characters. What would be a lore-accurate character for a Triton? What backgrounds and what classes? Well, to start things off, I would think the backgrounds Fisher, Haunted One, Marine, and Soldier would best fit them, as well as the Ashari, which is from Tal'Dorei Reborn. And it kind of hits the nail on the head there, since both Ashari backgrounds and the Tritons fight against evil elementals, protecting the material plane from the elemental planes. For classes, clerics, druids, fighters, paladins, and rangers are probably going to be your most common classes. But now, let's go ahead and take a look at each individual class and see what subclasses might best fit a Triton. Starting things off with Bard, I would say Maestro, Souls in Valor, and I'm giving them the Bard class for the same reason I would give Bugbears and Hobgoblins and the Gif a Bard class. And that is because the Triton are kind of a militaristic sort of race. So having a Bard in your army, someone who can use music to help motivate your forces actually makes sense. Especially when you take a look at our own history, where there would be war drummers to help motivate the troops. So yeah, having Maestro, which is literally a bard who uses the sounds of battle in their music, kind of makes sense. But Swords and Valor are probably going to be more common. Moving on to Barbarian. Primal Path of the Ancestral Guardian, the Depths, which can be found in the partner material, Runeterra Guides, Legends of Bilgewater, would be also a good fit. But besides that, you have your Storm Heralds and your Zealots. Ancestral Guardian is more of a reference to their inherited guilt that they receive from not being able to keep these elemental evils from escaping the plane of water when they first recognized that they had started to go missing. So each generation kind of feels this guilt that they and their ancestors could not protect the material plane. So yeah, Ancestral Guardian kind of makes sense. Storm Herald just for the fact that they are from the elemental plane of water, but it's kind of thematic, sort of. Zealot because of their ties to their god, which we'll get into with the next class, the Cleric. Now, there are two gods that they follow. Their creator god, which was kind of like, what was it called? Panera? Anyway, that god ties more into the divine domain of protection, which is the only unearthed arcana in this list. Besides that god, the other god, which I do not remember, would be of the divine domain of nature and tempest. But you also have the divine domain of zeal, just because it seems like it would fit the Tritons a bit. And you can find the zeal domain from the Planeshift series. Druid is our next class, and probably the most common class that a Triton can be. You know how Human Fighter is stereotypically the most basic type of character you can create? Well, a Triton Druid is even more basic than that. According to the wiki, there are more Triton Druids than there are Druids on the surface of the material plane. That's a lot of Druids. For your circles, I would say that Circle of the Land and the Moon would be your best bets. As far as the land goes, the land of choice would probably be the coast. There isn't an open ocean land one, so coast is going to have to be our closest we can pick. And a moon, of course, is being able to transform into water elementals at later levels. It makes sense. Moving on to Fighter, probably the second most common, though not entirely rare. For martial archetypes, I would say the Banneret, Cavalier, Champion, Monster Hunter, which is an unearthed arcana, Rune Knight, Samurai, and Scout, another unearthed arcana. Now, funny thing about the Tritons, they do actually have mounts, giant seahorses, and I believe sea lions. And hippocampus. Can't forget those. But also, a very interesting part about their military is that when they are at war with another faction, they will just send one guy, their champion, to face off against that other army's champion. And that's how their war is decided. Now, when they're fighting against monsters, they're just going to send the whole entire army. But when it's an army versus an army, they're just going to send one dude. Champion versus champion. Moving on to monk. I don't think there's going to be that many monks. But if there are any Triton monks, the monastic traditions that would make the most sense is the Way of the Four Elements and the Kinsei. They actually have a funny little weapon. It looks like a gigantic boomerang. I don't remember what they called it in the Wikipedia, but it's a pretty decent weapon. Moving on to Paladin. Now, I'm sure a lot of player characters will be Triton Paladins. In fact, I think the most popular ones for the Triton, as far as player characters go, is going to be the Paladin. And that is because it makes the most sense. The Tritons have an oath to protect the material plane from the dangers of the depths of the sea and the depths of the elemental plane of water. So the open sea and the Watcher's Oath are going to make the most sense. Now, you are going to have Tritons that are bodyguards to another race, which I will mention near the end of this video. So the Oath of the Crown could also make sense, especially with their own traditions of a feudalistic government. Moving on to Ranger. Probably a little bit more rare than Paladins, but they would still be pretty common. Not as common as Druids, mind you, but still pretty close. Conclaves for the Ranger would probably be the Gloomstalker, Hunter, Monster Slayer, and Horizon Walker for the same reason as the Oath of the Watchers, since both subclasses have the very same flavor text. They protect from the outer planes, and the Horizon Walkers outright hunt down portals and try to stop anything from coming through. So there's probably going to be a lot of Rangers and Paladins. Next is the Rogue, and for the Roguish archetype, I would say the Assassin, Inquisitive, Scout, and Swashbuckler would make the most sense for a Triton. One, because you're trying to kill powerful creatures, so Assassin makes sense. Inquisitive, you're trying to find these portals, or even try to find ways to hurt your foe the best. Or maybe you're trying to learn about the surface world. Not the likely, but it makes sense. Scout, of course, you're going through the ocean depths, whether that be in the elemental plane of water or in the material plane. Swashbuckler, really and truly, it's just how they're portrayed. They are portrayed and even described as being similar to elves in personality. They aren't elves. They just act in a similar manner to elves. Just want to make that clear. Moving on to our next class, we have Sorcerer. For your Sorceress origin, Divine Soul, Rune Child, Sea Sorcery, and Storm Sorcery make the most sense, especially from a lore perspective. Most of the Tritons have a tight connection to their god. Rune Child, well, they do have a relationship with, I think it was Storm Giants, so learning a little bit from them sort of makes sense. Sea Sorcery is an unearthed arcana, and it just makes sense because they're from the elemental plane of water. Moving on to our last class, the Warlock. For patrons, the Fathomless and the Genie. Merid makes the most sense. Fathomless, I would say, would be the least likely. The only way a Fathomless Warlock would work for a Triton is if it is their god. One of their two gods. That's really the only way that's going to work. Now, for the Genie, surprisingly, Merids and Tritons actually have a sort of mutual respect for each other. And Tritons even act as bodyguards for Merids when they are traveling. There's even a Merid, I think it was a princess, that they protect the most. I don't exactly remember, but I do know that the Merids and the Tritons have this mutual respect, which is surprising, because when I first learned about the Tritons, I knew that they didn't like evil elementals. So I was thinking, so genies, because they're elementals. But no, they actually have respect for the Merids. And now, with that being said, that is the end of this video. Have you played a Trident? If so, what class and background were they? Tell me about your character in the comments section below. And until next time, this has been Drehan, and I am offline.